We're live.
Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. You can find my books available on Amazon: Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth, and Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children. And also feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. I'm so happy to have Michaela Wade back on. She's co-founder of Family Law Assistance franchise in the UK. And she's last been on season 2, episode 116, season 3, episode 175, and season 4, episode 16. And we're going to talk about cameras in these courtrooms and when. Welcome, Michaela.
Hi. Thanks for having me back again. My gosh, hot topic, right?
Oh, yes. It needs to be done.
So I did a TikTok a little while ago talking about secrecy in the family courts.
Mhm.
And one of the issues that a lot of people have is the fact that the family court is private. You don't have cameras in family court. I don't know what it's like across the pond, Marianne, but
Mm.
here in the UK, you're not allowed to film. It's a criminal offence to film or record any part of the family court. And I
Mm.
certainly had my opinions on the matter, because whilst I understand that the system is overloaded,
Mhm.
broken, clunky, slow. Oh my gosh, if it was any slower, I think it would be in reverse.
Right. Right.
I I know people that have been on the phone and on hold to court admin for like days. I swear to God, they must age 20 years every time they ring the courts. And some courts are better than others. But just in my
Oh,
experience, just the brokenness, I think, of the
yes.
system, just overloaded. Um,
Right.
just before you even get into a courtroom. And then there's a lot of people that go through the court system and feel that it's something against them. They feel like, and I know you have a different experience of it being across the pond, but it's very different here in the UK. So I think, more to the point, should the courts be secret or not? I'm going out, and I know this is going to be a hot topic, which is why both of us are posting this live to our TikToks.
Right. I'm trying. It's giving me a hard time.
But it is. I can see there's comments, I think, already coming on. Yeah, there's people that's joining. I'm turning my head around just to make sure I can see people joining, because obviously this
Uh,
is Zoom. But I can see there's lots of people joining. I went out on a limb, okay, for the rights and wrongs, and I said, no, I don't think that they should be public. And the reason I said that was because ultimately the majority of the time that people are in family court is for their kids, whether it's custody, which is of course the term you guys use in the US, or residence here, or contact here. One of the problems you've got of having uh, a system whereby it is being recorded
mhm.
is that you've got to think of the kids here, and most kids will have access in some way, shape, or form to the internet. They can find things, and
Mhm.
in my job, I see lots of people who don't use social media in the best way, and I often
I know.
see screenshots and video footage being used as evidence in the family court, which ultimately, of course, harms children. So that was my take. That was my take on it, and trust me, it got attention.
Right. Oh, I mean, it, thank God for TikTok,
Right.
because I interviewed Mr. Rick Henry yesterday, because he's been posting his his courtroom videos, which was great. And they've been getting a lot of attention. And pro se's have to do this if they're going to try to get some type of someone to listen to them. And the judges are not listening because, again, with his case, that judge is just not listening to his evidence, and he's got it. I'm sure that's happening in. I'm guessing that's happening in your courts as well.
Yeah, I think the thing with evidence, it's tricky, isn't it? Because here in the UK, and I don't know what it's like across the pond, but certainly here in the UK, 70% of people here in the UK represent themselves.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yes.
So It's a lot. And when people think of putting evidence to the court, the reality of that evidence is it's not in any structured way. It's not in a court recognized way. Effectively, you've got somebody who's desperate to see their children, who's desperate to get fairness, giving the kitchen sink to the court, which is an absolutely human response to do, because you will see allegations, and there often is allegations of abuse, or they don't understand the process. So their human instinct is to want to go to court and bring with them their lives. Their lives in effectively a bag, and they want to give it to the court, and they need the court to know everything right now. Everything right now. Not necessarily understanding that some of the court hearings are actually quite admin-y. So what's that? Okay, just people are sort of joining the conversation. Guys, I'm just letting you know we're doing this live, so I'm just going to accept people in. There we go. Just accepting some people in so that they can join in the debate and hear what we've got to say.
Oh, good. Okay.
So yes, so I think that when it comes to evidence, there's a song, it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. And one of the things I'm always telling my clients is, can't just rock up with a supermarket of carrier bag with all of your life in it,
Right.
give it to the judge and go, crack on with that. Can you sort my life out? You need to do the thinking for the court. But I also understand that sometimes that these matters go on and on and on. There's adjourned hearings after adjournments. Like you said, that you had continuance after continuance after continuance, just dragging things on. And people do play tactics. This is an adversarial arena. People are, it is strategic. A part of the reason I don't get emotionally involved, and of course it's emotional, but for me, we're thinking of how to put one block on top of another and one foot in front of the other. So when it comes to evidence, there's a way of putting it in to make sure. And not all evidence, of course, is relevant. Newspaper clippings, for example, about how some bloke down the road had a case that sort of was similar to mine, and my God, isn't it corrupting? And how we're now, the courts don't want to know, they want to be case specific. So it's about partly knowing how to do it, knowledge, and knowledge, of course, is power. Know how to play the game.
Right. And it's when you submit this evidence and you tell the judge, okay, I've submitted this evidence, and they'll say, well, that happened in the past, is what happened on that podcast yesterday. She was telling him, well, your daughter getting shot in the hand 2 years ago, that's in the past. I mean, whoa, things like that are very disturbing when a judge says that. And even when I did my federal case, I submitted 1,000 pieces of evidence that were totally had merit. This was not frivolous evidence. And I even gave them copies of the transcripts. So I made life easy for them to look at this stuff. And I highlighted where things were. And the judge admitted to not looking at the evidence.
So here's a problem. Absolutely hit the nail on the head. Judges don't always look at evidence. One of the things that I do, bearing in mind, of course, I help litigants in person, so slightly different. Knowing that the court cases are so busy, don't get judicial continuity. You don't get the same judge. You don't get judges reading paperwork. You just don't. So often I normally put in and get clients to put in a short position statement, pretty much saying who's who, what's what, and what do you want, just so that the judge has got some semblance of a case. Putting a 50-page position statement with 1,000 pages of quote unquote exhibits just isn't going to get looked at. So what's the point in putting the kitchen sink in if it's not going to get looked at? Court judges in general, they don't have enough time. The system is just so overworked. It's so overworked, I think, is at the point of collapse. The delays in the family court these days are just horrendous. And I see courts all over the country, and I see, and one thing that I see that's exactly the same is that delay. Sometimes when I'm sort of saying, yes, I know, and you may be on the phone for days just to try and get through, but judges don't read evidence, and that can be demoralizing.
Mm.
I always think that the system is set up just to make you go away. So people often feel like they're pushed into decisions that they don't want to be pushed into. They think they've got a whole wide range of evidence to submit. It's not read. People often leave family court even when they get what they want. I'll
Mm.
always say this to people: there's never a punch the air moment in family court. Even when people get what they want, it's the biggest anticlimax ever. They think,
Right.
good God, I spent all this money or
Mm.
not,
Mm.
gone through all that stress, mental health, illness, for what? For what? Added to the fact you've got judges that appear not to care, judges that appear not to read evidence, when you've
Mhm.
probably spent all night putting your stuff together
Oh,
and making sure that you've put all of that into court, going, I've got a case. There's no way on earth this could fail. There's no way that he couldn't possibly not look at this one vital bit of evidence. And then you get there and they don't. And the reality does not match up to the expectations at all.
yeah, this is bad. I also was told on a podcast that, sometimes their clerks or their interns will look at the evidence and decide, oh, does a judge really need to look at this? And they'll make that decision. And
Agreed.
I'm like, I never really considered that. Sometimes maybe it's not the judge's fault that he doesn't see the evidence. He or she does not see the evidence. That's pretty
Ah,
bad when they're not being given, and I know what you're saying, that it's backlogged and their dockets are full. Then I don't know, get more judges on that are not in collusion with everybody else, which is another, but they've got to look at the stuff.
yeah, so it's really interesting. So here in the UK,
Mm.
I think to be fair, they know there's a problem. You're so right. Get more judges in. I mean, when
Mm.
people pay their fee to issue their
Mhm.
application,
Yeah.
they would expect a certain level of service. Okay,
Yeah.
getting the matter resolved should be one of them. I mean, the number of times I've gone into courts and the judge says, if you don't make an agreement, I'm going to have to make a court order, and I'm looking around for the cameras thinking, hang on, I thought we were in court. I thought that's what you were meant to be doing. That's what we're here for, because parties can't agree, parties can't come to an
Right.
agreement. We need to make a decision. um our solution here in the UK is they have tried to appoint more magistrates. They put a lot of emphasis, the court system
Yeah.
here put, I know, the court system here put a lot of emphasis on agreement,
Mhm.
whether that's in mediation here in the UK or even in court. That courts, and this is the thing that always blows my mind, okay, is judges, magistrates, the court system in general don't like making decisions.
Mhm.
They would, and I get it, things would work better by agreement than not. But in our world, by the time we get to court, we're done with that. We are way past that.
Right.
Party A is in their bunker, party B is in their bunker, and there's normally a whole bunch of no man's land where someone like me is trying to navigate. And when I say me, obviously the judge as well. It's a whole bunch of no man's land because we're in that situation.
Definitely. And, you know, they encourage mediation. And I remember going to mediation and I got dressed up for nothing, did my hair for nothing, put makeup on for nothing. And my attorney went into a room along with the opposing attorney who I can't use expletives. But anyway, I mean, the door was like at a crack and I can hear mumbling, like rumblings, like, I don't know what's going on in there. I was like looking at the door and the other team was sitting way over there in their chairs. And that the opposing attorney runs off in a huff and she just flew out of there and everyone else followed her. And my attorney comes out and he said, well, that's over. And I'm like, well, what happened in there? He said, didn't you hear me yelling? I said, I couldn't hear anything. But the gist of that was she was trying to do a HIPAA thing where she wanted they all want the psychologist's notes. Have you noticed that? I don't know if this is happening over there, but these opposing attorneys want the psychologist's notes on you and or the conversations between you and the child. And
Right, so it's a bit different here, but I get the principle of what you're saying. It's that thing about disclosure, isn't it? But let me just go back to a little point that you made about mediation, because although our process is slightly different here in the UK, the principles are very much the same. So oh my God, I wish mediation would work. You know, I'm a massive advocate of things being done by agreement because things just work better. But mediation here in the UK is almost like a box ticking exercise before you go into court.
Right.
So you, God, I've got to do this. And anyone I think that's officially booked mediation, you just know, well, they're just aiming for court. That's what this is about. And a bit like, I don't know if you're a chess person or a cards person. I'm a chess person
Me
myself.
too. Yes.
Right, okay. So it's like, why bother playing?
Yeah.
If you've got nothing to give up, why come to the table? If you're playing cards, you think, well, I've got all the cards. One party will always feel like they've got the cards. Why would they negotiate?
No. And that's what drags these cases out. And that's why we need these cameras and videos and tamper-proof mics in these courtrooms. Because
I
I've been,
think,
go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say that because I think when people talk about, and I get both sides of this argument. On the one side, I totally hear that. You're just thinking, well, hang on a minute. If 70% of people represent themselves, you know, and judges do muck up, and perhaps they don't always make the right decision, or perhaps they're not giving enough weight to a specific bit of evidence. I totally get that. But then the flip side of it, and I guess it's, oh, I thought long and hard about this. Like, what is my opinion? What do I honestly think about this? And I think my problem with having cameras in the courtroom is the kids. Because 9 times out of 10, they're the ones that are stuck in the middle. And what would be the ramifications? What would be the impact or the implication of the children seeing? Imagine that. Imagine like a 9-year-old seeing the footage of mummy and daddy in court. I can't even begin to think what impact that would have on a child.
But if you're a mentally sound parent, you would not show them this video.
It depends how. I mean, then what test would you go through? I'm just not sure. Just opening up that risk, aren't you? And very often there's that balance test. On the one hand, you've got the parents. I'm going to put rights deliberately in air quotes because here in the UK we don't have the Fathers Act 19 whatever, the Mothers Act 19 whatever, or the Step Parents Act. We've got the Children Act. So the children come first. So on the one hand, you're balancing with what's in the parents' best interests, and it might very well be, totally agree, that it might be in the parents' best interest to have court hearings recorded. But I'm personally not convinced it's in the child's best interest to have it recorded. That's kind of where I sit on that matter.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the court watching, I was court watching for Florida, you know, the Sunshine State, I don't know what they call it. But the judge just muted the pro se because he was tired of hearing her. She was presenting her last argument, and he got tired and he just hit the mute button. So I had to file a judicial complaint on him for treating a pro se like that. You can't do that. You know, he was out of his jurisdiction anyway, but that's another topic.
So I absolutely, so, you know, if I remember once going into court, and it was a Friday afternoon. The court hearing was about 3 o'clock. So we were late on in the day, right? And my guy, as you'd expect, had suited and booted, was completely anxious. We'd got the preparation done. He was, you know, he knew what he was going to say. He knew why he was there. He was like, he'd like geared himself up to be in front of this judge at 3 o'clock. And here in the UK, in front of a judge, traditionally judges knock off at about 4 o'clock.
Yeah, same.
Right. Right. Okay. Right. So I remember walking in, and I kid you not, we walked into the courtroom, and this judge had his feet up on the table, his hands behind his head, and the first thing that he says to us is, "I need a gin and tonic."
Oh no, that's
right. That look was the look that my client had. And I sort of just looked at them and he just thought, huh? And I'm thinking, what do you do in that scenario? So I remember just saying to him at the time, I'm like, well, he's not in any mood to hear anything today, is he? I mean, with
Oh,
an attitude
yeah.
like that. And I just said, we're just going to have to play dead on this one.
Oh,
Uh, but yeah, I mean, that was probably one of the most, and at that point, oh my God, I could have completely agreed with you. Where are the cameras? Who's recording this? I mean, court hearings here are recorded and you can
mhm.
get transcripts of court hearing, but I'm pretty sure that would have been redacted. You know, you just think,
Mm.
what, how in what world is that okay?
No. Like here, I mean, since some courts have cameras, some don't in some states, not all of them. But we're all working to try to change that. But what I do when I file a judicial complaint, I'm going after what the judge's behaviors are because you can't really complain about the ruling. They're going to do whatever they want. But it's like the one judge I had was absolutely atrocious. And I reported her like twice before and nothing happened. And then it's like, I'm going to report her one last time. And my friend helped me kind of fill it out. And I described in detail what happened and like how she wagged her finger in front of my face. And this is the only thing keeping you out of jail today. And I'm like, so it was things like that you want to document that this judge is saying to you, their tone of voice. And they listened. They listened to my complaint.
Wow, wow, bravo.
Yeah.
Here in the UK, we don't have that so much. We just don't. And I just think that, from sitting from a parent's point of view, I think that, like I said, I keep saying this, but 70% of people who go through family courts represent themselves. I get it. It can be frustrating for judges when admin don't do what their job is, and then they've got two parents who turn up to court unrepresented with the kitchen sink being thrown at them. They've not had a chance to read anything. It's frustrating. It is frustrating. Whilst I appreciate that, I think, I don't know, I don't know what the answer is. More money clearly isn't the problem. And I remember sort of one of the things I went through on a
Mm.
seminar here in the UK, our divorce procedure got shaken up considerably. We got rid of the no fault divorce. It was meant to be online, it's meant to be simpler. and it wasn't, in short, without going into the minutiae and the details. It wasn't simpler to begin with. It was just, well, a load of people sort of falling over themselves to get a system that was only half set up in the beginning to work properly. It is incredibly frustrating. So in my experience, whilst I do see shocking behavior, I do,
Mhm.
I think the main problem with it actually is the system itself. It really is. And
Yeah.
communication between parties, because don't forget, judges, certainly here in the UK, are relying on experts to provide them. They're meant to be the eyes and ears of the court. They got like social workers who provide reports for children,
Mhm.
etc. And there's no joined up thinking. There's no Department A speaking to Department B, which
Right.
of course makes the delay even longer. You're
Oh,
just
yeah.
left with frustrated parents. And I did a video actually about what happens after a court hearing, because what's not talked about, I don't think a lot, is never mind like with cameras, no cameras,
Mhm.
judges, shocking behavior, that has a massive impact on a parent afterwards.
Mhm, mhm,
It's not that, oh, you may have your final court order, now you're done, go away, have a nice life, enjoy your kids, whatever it might be.
mm,
You're just left in this emotional void, I'm going to say.
mhm,
With an ex, it's not going to change. I mean, you may have a court order, but you've got an ex that doesn't change. You've got a situation that, well, it's sort of changed, but kind of isn't. You're still going to have to live your life with when the eyes of the court are not on them. So, yeah, I think going back to your original point, um, should there be, should we have cameras and it being recorded? I totally see the value of that. I totally see the value because you do in criminal courts. But even here in the UK, it's not like none of it is all completely televised.
mhm.
Not like in America, like they have a lot more things that are online. But yeah, I totally see the value of it. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, like with the camera focused on the judge, and the opposings and the pro se. I mean, just that's all you're focusing on. And I know you brought up the kids, but like over here, well, I'm sure you know that we sequester the kids, and the judge and the attorneys and the transcript lady go in there and talk to them. So there's no, well, we didn't have cameras in there anyway, but the transcript lady was there.
Yeah.
And that was bad enough for me to read that stuff, you know. Uh Still, I almost wonder if you should have a camera in there just on the judge and the attorneys, not the kids. Like,
So we don't have kids in the courtroom, but you're talking about the kids. I think that's the problem. And you've got children hearing what the judge says about mum and dad. And that's going to have an indirect impact on the kids. And I think, what do you do about that? And also some of the parents as well, like some of the people that I help are really vulnerable. Like, for example, if we talk about domestic abuse, for example,
mhm,
in my experience, people don't want that. That is a really traumatic experience. If someone's gone through domestic abuse and they're standing in court and having that, their case or their experience televised or documented on film,
mhm.
that's quite, I wonder if that would even put people off from
Or
speaking their truth.
they can have that video, the video could remain at the courthouse. It doesn't go anywhere.
Fine, but you still got a judge talking about their experience because you can't redact everything. You know, the whole point is to record what's going on. So if you've got someone that's gone through domestic abuse, and bearing in mind most cases that I deal with do have elements of abuse, and I get that that's a spectrum, but even if we take the worst case scenario, some of the cases I deal with have got some very, very sinister
Mhm.
allegations, some very sinister allegations. And I'm not sure that somebody who's going through that would want that televised.
Well, the ones that were we've the states that have the cameras in the court, it's not going on TV. Is that what you mean?
Those videos are going to be recorded somewhere. And if they're and they have to be, because that's the whole point of it. I mean, right now you have transcripts which are available if you needed to. So here in the UK,
Mhm,
people often will get a transcript, for example, if they want to appeal a hearing or if they didn't take a note of something.
mhm,
You can get a transcript of the hearing so that you hear a portion of whatever it is that's being discussed. And the whole point of having a video is to have some record of that. So if you can have access to a transcript, then logic will dictate you've got access to a video.
mhm,
So my point is, if there's a case when there's been heinous allegations of abuse,
mhm,
what about this? What about this? The door swings the other way, because I mean, I get it where there are false allegations of abuse, where people are being abused falsely.
mhm,
If someone can get access to that, and and a child hears about how one parent accuses the other of some, and the details of that, the camera doesn't need to be pointed at anyone else but the judge. Even if the camera is just pointed on the judge, those details
mhm,
could still have a major implication on those being falsely accused of it, of domestic abuse, and those who have gone through horrendous abuse.
mhm,
Most of the people that I deal with, and both sides of that coin, by the way, the people that have had horrendous allegations falsely against them wouldn't want that, I'm pretty sure, publicized.
mhm,
And I also know that some people who have taken so much courage, if you look at the other side of the fence, people have taken a huge amount of courage just to report
mhm,
that
mhm,
they've been sexually abused, for
mhm,
example,
mhm,
you know, just to have that courage to report it in the first place, just to have that courage to make the application, to out it. That's quite something to be recorded on a film.
Maybe there would be different um levels of recording, like your basic family court case, and then you'd
Mm.
have those areas that you mentioned would be handled differently in some way. I'm not a brainchild, but I'm just thinking, because
Mm.
the thing that I noticed, like, in my case, was that, the ex was taking transcripts and court orders and reading them to the kids in the presence of the psychologist, where it was like, you might as well have a camera in the courtroom there. He was giving them the blow by blow and increasing anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe with the cameras, there would be different levels. Like you've got your basic family court case. And then if it turns into something more sinister, then it gets moved to a different level of, I don't know, someone
I don't
would,
know. It's interesting. Okay. I mean, I'm just going to look at see how many people are following in this
okay,
debate.
I'm looking to,
Um, okay, there's quite a few people that are following at the moment. I've got 7 people live. So those 7 people, if you're watching this, I bet you that all of those people who are going through family court, they will all have allegations of abuse.
Mhm,
Either they're making them
mhm.
or they've been on the receiving end of that. Let me just change my camera. There we go.
Yeah, my camera
Ah, my camera. There we
closer.
go. There we go.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword.
it is, yeah. And I thought long and hard. There we go. That's much better. You're
Yeah.
right. And I had so much problem in comprehending
Mhm,
where do I sit on this based on what cases I see on the daily basis. And of course, I help people represent themselves. So I'm seeing the bulk of people who go to court on a daily basis.
mhm,
And I'm not so sure there's any such thing as a run-of-the-mill court case, because to that person, the abuse,
mhm,
it's how they experience it.
mhm,
So I'm not sure how I rank it sometimes, but I'm not sure how they would rank it, because from their experience, and we're not in a criminal court. So the burden of proof here in the UK for a civil family
mhm.
court is a lot lower than a criminal matter.
Like, I
It,
guess I would consider my case a run of the mill
uh-huh.
because there was nothing. I mean, there were false allegations, but it wasn't sinister enough.
Mm,
It was sinister, but not sinister enough. But just to document the judge's crazy behaviors
mm.
would be enough to maybe help make change. I guess we need to just want to bring change to these judges that are just running rogue.
Yeah, yeah, and I'd see the merit in that. But like I said, I think that I worry that won't happen, and I salute those who are
Yeah.
campaigning. Gosh, I really do, because I think there's loads of aspects of the family court that God needs change.
Mhm.
Um, but I always worry that when we talk about secrecy in the family court, of course it's a hot topic, because if you're a parent that's going through it, and you're going through it and you see the shocking behavior, or you experience something very unpleasant in the family court, of course your human instinct is to want to rebut that. Your human instinct is to want to
Mhm.
fix it.
Mhm.
I mean, fixing it is probably why I got into this in the beginning, was wanting to fix things. But
Right.
I think I struggle with if that is ever going to change, because of the reasons I outlined.
Well, I mean, these judges have got to read their evidence and slow down. I know they're slow enough, okay? But I'm just saying they have to take their time with these cases. I felt like I was being rushed in and rushed out.
Yeah, I get that. And I've also heard judges say, I was lucky enough to have sort of an audience with an eminent judge here in the UK. And one of the things that they said was they aren't afforded enough reading time. If they aren't afforded enough reading time, they're not afforded enough time to consider the issues. It's not simply a case of just reading the paperwork.
Mhm.
but you need to do something with that information. You need to ruminate on that to make a decision, because this judge in particular understood that their decision has a profound impact on the families involved.
Mm-hmm.
I wish all judges, maybe they do, I don't know, but it sometimes appears that all judges don't do that it doesn't feel like that. It feels rushed. If people going through family courts feel it's rushed,
Mm-hmm.
then it must be. So
Yeah.
therefore, my argument always comes back to the system. Like, what's going on? What's wrong with the system? How can
Mm-hmm.
we build that into so that courts do they're not feeling rushed. They're not making stupid mistakes. They're not being overtly frustrated, and they're not taking that out on the people that are in front of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have, other than I would like to see family court abolished. And I think what might help, like here we have civil court. And of course, if there are sinister allegations of sexual abuse, that would go right into criminal court. That should not
Oh,
even be ruled on in family court. That's not a family court thing. It just goes automatically to criminal court, get that sorted, then go into civil court. And if a parent wants a jury of 6 people, then they can decide if they want that or not. And
yeah, yeah.
maybe it might be handled with a little bit more respect than what our judges are doing in family court to parents and children every day.
It's funny because I get asked that quite a lot. I get asked, why, if there are allegations, why doesn't this go straight to criminal? Especially when you think of some of the sinister stuff that you and I see on a daily basis. Certainly here in the UK, a huge problem, because if we think that the civil court or family court's bad, well, the criminal court is just as bad in terms of where they are with overloading and delay. But criminal's got an additional, I'm going to call it out, problem that civil courts don't have. And that is the burden of proof. So in criminal court, it is binary. They did guilty, not guilty. They either did it or they didn't do it. And that's because the burden of proof, you have to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, half the problem you've got in domestic abuse cases is that can often be quite grey.
Mm-hmm.
Victims don't report things. Victims do hope they change. There sometimes isn't the high level of evidence
Mm-hmm.
that is required in a criminal court, which is why a lot of the time domestic abuse cases often fail
Mm-hmm.
in a criminal court. And then people feel they've gone through all of that only to be knocked back at the final hurdle. And then where are they left? They're left in a oh, guess what? With me and you, in a family / civil court. I agree with you. I'm not a fan, although it's my business, I think things would work better by agreement. But I do sometimes think that might be slightly idealistic. And I'm forever the optimist. I will, anyone that's worked with me before will know that I put a lot of stock into agreement. I put a lot of stock into negotiations, which actually
Mm-hmm.
aligns with what the family courts here advocate. But the reality is very different, and I'm not naive enough to think that the reality is very different to what I'd ideally like to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, I try to catch people before they even go in there. you know, in fact, some guy was fixing my window, and I said to him, I said, are you married, divorced, what? I'm so nosy, and he said, oh, I'm divorced. I said, oh, really? Have you ever been to family court? He's so smart. He said, my ex-wife and I, we walked in there and we saw the craziness in there. We both walked out and said, we can handle this ourselves.
Amen to that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And even the people that moved in across the street, I said, "Oh yeah, I run this podcast. Whatever you do, stay out of family court." Just telling you, you know, because it's so sad that people. There's too many personality disorders out there. I heard 1 in 20 is a sociopath. So now we got problems. And so it's hard to negotiate with someone who doesn't have the capacity to do that.
Really. Yeah, completely. I couldn't agree more. So I think the answer to the question, oh, I'd like to think yes, that would be an amazing idea. I'm a massive advocate for change.
Mhm.
I think that the whole system, the whole legal system is a little antiquated. I mean, if we think about what happened when we went to COVID, I mean, courts weren't doing anything remotely. I mean, we only, for us here in the UK, courts only had service really by email over COVID, and then they only had virtual hearings over COVID. They only sort of, I don't know, I sort of joke a little bit that the courts were drag kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
Right, I agree with you, yeah. Well, I saw on TikTok, and I wish I could pull it up, but they were doing a Zoom, so you had your 4 people there, right? And the judge was admonishing the mother on parental alienation, and the kid comes up behind the mother and was listening to what was going on, and and then that kid started mimicking what the mother was doing, like, making gestures, and so the judge said, "Cl Get her out of there and close your door, and if we have to do this again, custody's going back to the father." I mean, you've got proof of whatever's going on, and yet these judges still won't make a a decision.
Yeah. I got asked actually, I did a video today on TikTok about can a judge make a decision on the second, or does it have to be the third hearing? And here in the UK, I mean, judges got a wide ambit of discretion, but very often, again, courts don't like making court orders, which is mind blowing, really, when you think,
Right.
so I've just paid my fee, we're in court, huh, what am I missing here? It's
Right.
like chapter 20 of a book and you've missed out chapters 1 to 20.
Mhm.
um, I do get people's frustration. I totally understand that.
Now, with your opposing attorneys, do they I may have asked you this before, I'm not sure, but towards the end and the judge wants to write an order, does the opposing pop up and say, "Oh, judge, I can write the order and you can sign it"?
Yeah, yeah, oh my gosh, yes, yes, that does happen. And in fact, the number of times I have people come to me after the court hearing going, well, the other side drew up the order, but then they've slipped this in, or that wasn't discussed, or that was not how it went down, so
Right.
get this changed. Yeah, I see that a lot. Normally, if I'm there, I make sure that we see the order before it's gone in front of the judge, or there's some kind of monitoring.
Right, there
So,
should yes,
oh my
yes.
God, oh my God. And I always tell people, like, don't, my advice, my top tip for anyone is don't go into court alone, because for you, it's everything, but you're going to miss the small stuff. And then
Mhm.
sometimes the small stuff becomes the big stuff.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I totally get that.
Yes, yes, it's very sad, and our kids are paying the price, and, I would just like it just to stop. It just needs to stop. I would like to see at least over here our family court and, s CPS to some level abolished. Just get rid of them.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I'm not like I said, I'm not a brainchild. I don't have the answers. I'm hoping someone that's listening to us.
Oh my God, I know. I say this. I thought if someone said to me, Michaela, what would you say the solution is? I wouldn't have a clue. I
Yeah.
wouldn't. I don't know what the answer is. I don't. And I've been doing this now for 17 years, and I'm still none the wiser.
Well, and that's to your point is that the judicial system hasn't changed. Even, foster care, I was listening to someone, the foster care problems, even 40 years ago, are still the same problems.
Yeah,
So nothing
yeah.
is changing. So
Nothing, nothing is changing. It's funny actually. I had somebody just to kind of it just makes me giggle because on the forms that some of the forms we've got here in the UK, um, someone said to me, "Well, those forms aren't very inclusive, are they?" I went, "Oh my God, they're right." So in the genders, for example, they had male or female. I'm like, yeah, not inclusive, antiquated, stuck in the dark ages. Um, and I'm not so sure when that's going to change. And I wish it would, but I'm not
I
so sure.
see, like in England, um see, over here, we've got incentives, Title for B, D, and E. So Title for B is CPS. So that CPS brings in money. They are incentivized, and you know this, I'm sure. And Title 4D for us is in child support enforcement. So you know there's incentives, and they shave off so much off a dollar of every child support made. It goes into either road paving and also back into the judge's pockets. I don't know if that's happening over there.
Not, no, in fact, I'm not so sure. I don't know how the finances work. I just focus on what I'm good at, but
Mhm,
I don't think it's as monetized as that. I think
mhm.
most of our stuff is government paid for,
Uh-huh.
and because it's government paid for, in my experience, it tends to be a bit slow and a bit clunky.
Mhm,
And that's the problem I find from here in the UK. That's my main thing that I've noticed.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both have the same problems with these cases being dragged out, and it stresses parents and the kids out. And I'm sure you get stressed out because you're trying to help these people through this.
I think it's funny, if I was to say my biggest stress, it would definitely be court admin for sure. Yeah. There's one
Mm.
court that's in the big city that nobody can get through to. And I say to them, oh, you need to chase, 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 chase. I mean, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times.
Mhm.
Chase the court, chase the court. And they're like, oh, yeah, but it's this particular court. I'm thinking, I know, I know.
Oh, no.
You go on
Yeah.
for hours and then you get some half-hearted response. They don't want to be there. Ugh, I get it. I get it. It's so demoralizing and
Mhm.
it's so frustrating. I really do feel I really do feel for them.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's just I don't know. I wish I could say something positive on this Monday morning.
I
You
know, I know. But it's nice though because I'm here in the UK, you're there in the US, and it's funny how very similar issues. I mean, just because you're different side of the planet, the issues between and the issues affecting children, the issues affecting family court are not dissimilar at all.
know?
You're facing the similar problems that we here in the UK face.
Mhm. Well, when I had mentioned, sequestering the kids and possibly having a camera on the judges and the attorneys, I think would have been good because, in my case, after they were sequestered, my attorney came out, and the first thing she said, she ran over to me, she said, "They twisted your son's words." It's like, "Oh, yeah, I mean, I can see that on the transcript, but it's not like in your face that he got on the bench and then he said something completely different
I
than
know.
what was said in there that he promised the kid. See, these judges are promising these kids things and then they don't follow through. So how does a child, you know, trust anyone
Mm.
in authority?
We have a problem here in making sure that the child doesn't have too many professionals involved. Uh,
Mhm,
or if they've been subject to lengthy litigation, the kids just want this over. So sometimes, you'll find more parental alienation because they'll just say anything just to stop this nightmare from happening. And very often they will align themselves with the resident parent
mhm.
just to stop it, just to stop it. So yeah, it
Oh,
really, yeah.
it's all sad. It's sad all around, but I think
It,
ch I think change is coming. Do you feel that change is coming?
I don't know if it's slow. I mean, I joke about this all the time, but if it's slow, oh my God, it's really slow. It needs to be faster. I was hoping that COVID would accelerate some change. I think it has in terms of a system, but I don't think it goes far enough. I don't think it goes far enough. I want to know what people think because I've only got like 5 minutes left before I
Okay,
have
great.
to go off. So let me just see how many people are following. Let's tip the camera a bit. Uh, oh wow. So I think we've got 423 likes so far.
Wow, I can't see. I can't see what I'm looking at. I My eyes are really bad. I noticed that lately.
I've just got new glasses as well.
I know, and I'm like, I think maybe I need another prescription.
I think what would be really good is for guys, for those of you that are watching this sort of live between me and Marianne, drop your comments below on both of our channels, because Marianne's got this going live on her channel. Obviously, I've got this going live on my channel. Drop your comments below. We want to know what you think, okay? Because this was a hot topic before. This continues to be a hot topic. So I want to know what your experiences are. And I'm just interested. What would you change? What would you change about the family court?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there should be cameras in the family court? Because that would be, you've obviously heard two slightly different opinions on the matter now. So let us know.
Right. And do you think they should be abolished and take it back down to 1960?
Right?
I don't know. Maybe things moved faster in 1960 and we don't know that.
Probably. Oh my God, I wouldn't like to think so. I would
I
think
don't
it's,
know.
I would imagine.
Or
Yeah.
I mean, like court cases getting over with in a proper manner.
Yeah. But then things were just so different. Like many people didn't divorce. Divorce wasn't really a thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
Like you think about how culturally things have changed, and I think the court is trying to keep up, badly in my opinion, with sort of
Right.
cultural changes, like we live in a very sort of woke society, an inclusivity society, which I don't think the courts reflect. And I don't think it's as fast paced, because more people are getting divorced, more people are going through child arrangement issues, and I just don't think the courts can cope on
No.
both the practical level and I think on an emotional level.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey, how can people reach you if they have any questions?
Right, drop down. So you guys are following my channel. I'm Michaela at Family Law Assistance. We are everywhere. So Family Law Assistance is like everywhere. You've only got to put my name into Google, and there's a lot of me.
That's
um,
good. Yeah.
that comes up on the internet. But yeah, DM me or drop me an email.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to have you back on. We'll do this again.
Yeah, love to.
Okay, so don't jump off. Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple iTunes, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, other platforms I don't know about. And please feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you so much, Michaela Wade from the UK, where I used to live for 2 years in Newcastle.
You poor thing. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh!